One moment. My apologies here. You are live, Eckhart.
Welcome, all of you on YouTube, Facebook, live for the first time. We've had a few technical difficulties, so I'm a little bit late. That was a great opportunity, of course, for you to be present in the moment. And let's continue that before we start and perhaps look at a few questions concerning conscious manifestation. Let's just take a moment to become aware of the present moment. Vitally important in any endeavor that you undertake, no matter what it is not to lose your connectedness with the present moment. So before you start a new enterprise, a new activity, always good to take a moment for awareness. Basically, that's what it is. Sometimes people ask, well, what is the present moment? How do you where is it? What does it even mean to become aware of the present moment? And the first thing, of course, is that you become aware of whatever surrounds you. That's the entry point into the present moment, a very easy entry point into a present moment awareness. Some people may call it mindfulness, is to become more aware of whatever surrounds you here and now. Sense perceptions, just be with what is. Give it attention, some attention. The room you're sitting in. Maybe there's a window, you can look out of the window. You can see trees behind me, I can't see them, I know they're there. This is, you enter the present moment by becoming more aware of sense perceptions, auditory, visual, and perhaps others. And of course, what that does, you might notice, is there's less mental noise. The voice in the head that speaks and speaks, that talks to you, that you have a dialogue with, a monologue that comments and interprets and takes positions, mental positions, identifies with, likes, dislikes, yes, no, never stops talking. That's the mind, the voice in the head that most people are completely identified with, and that means they're not present. So the first step is take some attention away from that by simply becoming aware of sense perceptions. And if you can look at something natural, that's even better, because a natural thing, a tree, a flower, a plant, the sky, uh, a natural thing lends itself to present moment awareness more than a man-made, human-made thing. So anything natural that you can look at for a moment, focus on, and give it attention, acknowledge it. You don't need to think about it. So it's just become aware of the present moment through sensory perception. And already, if you can do that, if perhaps a few minutes before you were very much immersed in the problem-making mind, it wasn't actually solving any problem, because this continuous mind activity actually creates more problem than it solves. If it's not focused, if it's unconscious. So already, suddenly, there's a certain amount of peace that descends upon the world, your world. It becomes a bit more peaceful. You become aware of the aliveness of things. And then the next step for present moment awareness is you become aware of yourself. Now that's very important too, because that's the foundation for the entire world. Whatever the world that you experience it through yourself. So, and whatever you manifest in this world, you manifest through yourself. Now, what does it mean to become aware of yourself? Now, you might be tempted to think that you start thinking about your life, you and your life. And of course, that's very problematic. Your past, your future. Or you can think about things that you identify with, the huge problems the world is facing. But that's not becoming aware of yourself. Becoming aware of yourself is something more vital, something deeper than being aware of your historical self, all your memories, all your expectations for the future. So none of that is really becoming aware of yourself, because those are thoughts. You become aware of the simple fact that you are here as a conscious presence that's very much inextricably linked with what we call the present moment. Now, this may seem strange at first. You're becoming aware of yourself as a conscious presence. No need to remember who you are beyond the fact that you are. Becoming aware of the I amness of yourself. For those of you who haven't never heard of this, it might seem a little strange. Become aware that even if you do not remember your past at all, who you are as a historical person, what is left of you if you do not remember who you are as a historical person? If you don't think about yourself, what's left is a certain inner spaciousness opens up that replaces the usual activity of continuous mental noise, thinking. A spacious awareness opens up. And you cannot say much about it. You can't analyze it. You're simply aware that you are, that there is a presence that is inseparable from who you are. There's also a stillness there that's part of that presence. But it's not an asleep stillness, and it's not the stillness that you find when you're getting tired. It's an alert stillness. And that is the core of what we call present moment awareness. So you're not really aware of the present moment because the awareness is the present moment. Beyond sense perceptions, that was the starting point. And then you go deeper. And you simply become aware of yourself as consciousness, a still, alert presence. There's a lot more one could say about it, but this is just our starting point for today. The important thing is, once you have had even a glimpse of it, as much as possible, reconnect with that as you go about your daily life, as you are engaged in activities, as you speak to people, interact with people, as you interact with people on media, social media, etc. As much as possible, reconnect and find these moments of alert stillness, alert, still presence. And that becomes then the foundation for everything you do. And that another word for that is spiritual awakening. You're spiritually awakened. Begins with just a glimpse of awareness of yourself, the awareness that there's something deeper in you than the person with its history. That awareness is a direct realization. It is not something that is conceptual. That frees you from what we call the ego, which is all the conditioning of your mental emotional field, all the things you identify with. And then you derive your sense of who you are from a deeper place within. And that's an enormous liberation. And then you can operate in this world in a much more effective way. And you can operate in this world in a way that is much more beneficial for yourself and humanity. You can then, from that foundation, we can talk about manifestation. If you manifest from that foundation, rather than manifest from the usual sense of identity that is exclusively derived from the ego, which is the thinking mind, the narrative that most people identify with as me. That's me. And the narrative of me is partly personal and partly collective. These are energy streams that what we call thought are energy formations that are invisible. And these energy formations are could be compared to ripples on the surface of being. That's the thought activity. And humans who have no awareness of this deeper dimension, they are trapped on the level of the surface level of the movement of energy forms that we call thoughts and emotions. So that's your mind is, and whatever happens in your mind is conditioned by your surroundings and by your past, so-called past. So humans are literally possessed in the absence of awareness. They are literally possessed by the thought forms that go through their mind. And so they are partly, as I said, partly personal, partly collective. And sometimes they're relatively harmless. And at other times, they can be like a viral infection on a mental level. And you don't even know what's happening to you. When violent mass movements happen, human unconsciousness expressing itself collectively through violence, that means humans are at the mercy, completely possessed by these energy formations that have taken possession of them. And they don't even know it. Sometimes you know it in a you perhaps all know, perhaps even from your own experience, how sometimes one thought can take possession of your mind and it refuses to go away, and it proliferates, it creates other related thoughts in your mind, and you suddenly become obsessive with something. And some people live like that. They are possessed by one particular mind form, and they interpret the entire world through the screen of that mind form, and everything, suddenly they have an explanation for everything because everything is interpreted through that screen. Sometimes it's a mental illness. It gets close to mental illness when you feel paranoid and so on, and everybody suddenly becomes your enemy. So you free yourself from that. Ultimately, without awareness, thinking can, even good things in your mind can very quickly become amplified and turn it into something very unconscious and destructive. So always returning to that deeper dimension. Let's start with the first question. Let's see. When it comes to conscious manifestation, my interest at this point is not in manifesting anything for myself personally, but in wanting to help manifest a world that is more peaceful and just for everyone. Can how you teach conscious manifestation help with that? Good question. Relevant. Manifesting a world that is more just. I think that was the word. More peaceful and just for everyone. Well, that would be it's a good aim. Now, ultimately, of course, what you experience as the world is intrinsically one with your consciousness. The only place where you experience the world is in your consciousness. Philosophers have even questioned whether there actually is a world out there independent of conscious perception. We don't need to go there, but there's no doubt that the entire world happens inside you, one could say. You don't know what you see, what the eyes transmit, the senses transmit becomes nerve impulses that are sent to the brain, and that's just on the physical level. And then these nerve impulses are decoded, and then some kind of word appears within you. But to what extent that corresponds to a world out there, we don't even know. So to change the world, so you look at the world uh, to in some way you could almost say, go as far as to say, what you're actually looking at is a reflection in the external, in the world of form, of your state of consciousness, one could say. It's an interesting way to look at it. And the state of consciousness is partly there is your personal world and there is a collective world. So the two, they are connected, but they're not the same, because first of all, there is what you experience as a world in your personal life, or the people you habitually interact with, where you live, your surroundings. It starts with simple things like even the objects that surround you habitually where you live. So your world is your personal, your relationships with humans that you live with, uh, your relationships with other humans that you meet every day casually, or that, the where you work, the people you work with. So all these things, your personal life, so-called life, is one sphere that you move in. And the important thing is not to neglect that in search of a better collective world. The two are related, but to disregard, this is a mistake that is often made, to disregard your personal sphere, the world that is immediately accessible to you as you and your life, the people in your life, where you live, all that, your work. To neglect that, it's very seductive to think there's so much wrong with the world out there, the collective. That's really what I should be concerned with, because there's so much wrong out there. You can see it. You just have to you turn on some kind of device, whether it's television or that brings you the news and the commentaries, continuous stream. And then, of course, that is the collective world that then enters your living room or wherever you are. And then they get mixed up. They can obliterate, the collective can obliterate your personal life. And you think your personal life is quite irrelevant now, because what really matters, the world needs to change. It's so dreadful. Well, yes, the world needs to change, and the world is changing because humanity is a work in progress. Humanity is slowly evolving in fits and starts and regressive periods. It takes a few steps forward and then a few steps, 4 steps forward, 3 steps back, then a few more forward. There's a gradual evolution of humanity, and to focus only on what is going wrong within that process, that evolutionary process, is also very misleading, because that's what you see when you watch the media and so on. It focuses not on what's going right or what has gone right, it focuses on what's going wrong. Then you give that more and more attention. By giving attention to something, you amplify it. So whatever you give it, now I'm not saying to completely ignore the world, no, but to give it an excessive amount of attention and only continuously think about what's wrong with the world, then you forget what's right with the world, and that then diminishes. So we have the external world coming into your living room, for example, through the media. And it can be, as I said, you can sometimes believe that your personal world, your immediate sphere of influence is irrelevant, but that's not the case. So the starting point with changing the world is to become aware of how you operate in this world. The starting point is, how do you relate to the humans in your life? How do you, what is your mind? What is your mind doing? What is your predominant state of consciousness? What are your predominant emotions? What are the predominant thoughts that go through your mind? It's vitally important to become aware of that. If you're not aware of what the predominant emotions are, that the predominant thoughts are, plus accompanying emotions that go through your mind, you are unaware. And the emotions, that the thoughts and emotions that arise continuously within you are a form of conditioning, and so they take possession of you. So it's vitally important as the starting point for changing the world is to become aware of your world. How do you operate in this world? How are your relationships? Uh, is there a lot of antagonism? Are there grievances and a lot of conflict? Um, are there many people that you hate? Are there more people that you like or love? Is there love, compassion, or not so much? How do you relate to people? How do you relate to strangers that you meet in a shop, in a store? How do you relate to somebody you meet in an elevator? All these things are part of what you manifest as your world. So it's how do you manifest, what is the predominant energy that you manifest in your life that affects other humans? That is a very important starting point that, of course, is expressed in the famous saying, be the change that you want to see in this world. Nobody knows who actually said that. Some people say Gandhi said it. He could have said it, but he probably said something similar. I don't think he said that literally, but it doesn't matter. It's a very important pointer, a very important thought. Be the change that you want to see in the world. So change starts with you. And that means your consciousness, your state of consciousness. Um, what is become aware of your mind? What is how much complaining do you do? Useless complaining, not a sort of complaining that can actually bring about change, but useless complaining about other people and groups of people and uh, pronouncing half of humanity to be evil, uh, whatever it is. Um, be aware of your mind. Um, vitally important. What kinds of thoughts are there? And once you the ability to become aware of your mind, what kinds of thoughts your mind is producing, once that grows, that means there's more awareness in you, there's more presence in you. Another dimension of consciousness has arisen. So be conscious, what do you bring into this world on a daily basis? Do you bring more loving kindness, compassion with other humans, empathy, uh, a friendly, a kind word, even to strangers? Do you acknowledge every other human being that you meet, even if you meet them only casually? Do you acknowledge the being of that human beyond what role this human plays within that brief interaction? Somebody sells you something. You're asking somebody for information, whatever it may be. So do you acknowledge the beingness of the other, if only for a few seconds, giving it attention? See, there is beyond the personality, there's something deeper. Do you briefly, can you sense the being? Ultimately, it means the sacredness of every human, no matter what their personality displays. Next question is, observe, are you at the mercy of how other people behave around you? Do you react? Or are you at the mercy also of situations or circumstances? Now, what do I mean When I say at the mercy of, it means that somebody is angry at you, the world is full of people who are very angry and frustrated. Uh, they may perhaps, they are justified in being angry because life is difficult. So one can always justify anger and frustration and grievances, of course. On a conventional level, often these things are justified. But what do you meet somebody who's angry, says something angry at you, driving, for example. Somebody shouts at you. Are you aware enough not to be drawn into the same energy that the other person manifests? Are you able to simply stay clear and present? Not easy. So but you can only change the world is by not reacting in the same way in which the world impinges upon you or treats you through humans. So you have to be more aware than that. And so that's the world changes when your state of consciousness is no longer determined by other people's state of consciousness that you may meet. Or no, that really is a big change already. If your mental emotional state is no longer determined by somebody else's mental emotional state, that's a huge awakening. And because as long as your mental emotional state is determined by somebody else's mental emotional state, in Eastern terms, it means it's a perpetuation of karma. So there's no freedom in that. So you can, if somebody's nice to you, you're nice to him or her. Okay. But if somebody's not nice to you, what happens? Jesus was talking about something similar. It's easy to be nice to someone. Jesus said, this is a big paraphrase because I don't remember literal passages from the Bible. Jesus said, it's easy to be nice to others who are nice to you, but what about those that are not nice to you? That's what really matters. It doesn't mean, of course, that you become a doormat or you don't have nothing to do with that. In fact, there's a great inner power and strength that arises when you're no longer continuously reactive. That is really weakness. So if you become angry when somebody's angry at you, the ego regards this as power. You have compensated for feeling of having been diminished by somebody's attack, verbal attack or criticism. The ego feels diminished. To me, sometimes it happens when I drive because I'm relatively slow most of the time. And sometimes people shout at me and say, "You idiot." Okay, and then I look at them. No, they're expecting me to shout back, but I don't do that anymore. It's happened too often, so it's too unpleasant. I don't need it. I don't feel diminished by somebody saying, "You idiot." It's just that's his or her state of consciousness manifesting through words at the moment. That's so fine. And then I just look at them, and sometimes they become even more disconcerted because there's a lack of reaction. Or they might think I'm completely deaf. Maybe I'm deaf. I can't hear what they're saying. Just a little example. But it's amazing, for example, how traffic, it's a simple thing, can make people unconscious. So the moment they get behind the wheel, they become reactive and unconscious and take everything personally. So it can be funny. It's good sometimes if you can laugh at the ego. But if you want to change the world, you have to start with yourself. What is it that you emanate? It's not only what you emanate through words and actions, it's even what you emanate energetically. Every human being, if you're a little bit sensitive, then you can sense that every human being has a certain energy emanation that's part of manifesting the world that you experience, because you see it through the lens or the veil of all the conditioning within you, the mental, emotional, and even energetic conditioning within you. So you meet people who are you can sense that they are in a state of unhappiness. It's a generic term that could mean many things. They are in a state of ultimately suffering, because even a person who is angry is really suffering. They don't know they're suffering, but it's an unpleasant state and it affects the body. Uh, it it that's that kind of stress that anger represents affects the harmonious functioning of the body, the immune system, the heart, blood circulation, everything. So it's not only not ultimately not pleasant, it's harmful. First, it's harmful to your body, it's harmful to other human beings, unless they are immune. And so if they are immune to a negative emanation from another human being, now you can't do that through a vaccine. That's the kind of immunity that can alter. That immunity is awareness, presence. So you're not at the mercy of other humans. You are free. You may not succeed every time, because humans can be very difficult. Not you, just other humans. So humans can be really difficult. And you might have noticed when you are interacting with humans and you have discussions, another interesting fact you might notice, that you are always right and the others are always wrong. It's a very strange fact. Um, and if that's the case in your life, you have to wonder for a moment, isn't that strange? I'm always right. Wow, I must be Superman or Superwoman. Or you're very unconscious. It's one or the other. So self self knowledge is the most difficult knowledge. Uh, Jesus was already talking about that. He said it's easy to see the splinter that is in somebody else's eye and says, look at the splinter in your eye, let me remove it for you. But you can't see the beam that is in your own eye. That's a huge thing. It's in you, but you see what's wrong with the other. That's easy. And wrong means unconscious. But to see your own patterns, that's the challenge. But if you don't, you cannot manifest, because that is the starting point for manifesting a better world, and then it spreads out from there. So the it's so the essence of what I'm saying here is become conscious of the fact that often you are at the mercy of other people or situations, and your state of mind or your emotional state is completely controlled and reactive. Uh, so I mentioned human beings, that you react to you. When you know, it's also situations. You find yourself in a situation that is suddenly regarded as undesirable. You are, and that is nowadays a very common thing, because many people for months have been trapped at home and can't interact with people anymore except through the technology. So many limitations have arisen in people's lives of a collective kind, millions of people experiencing the same limitations. Of course, some are affected much by that much more than others. But yes, to also not just reacting to humans, but reacting to situations that are regarded as limiting, frustrating, and so on. Can you rise above situations also and become free of that reactivity, that, for example, the continuous complaining in your mind about what's wrong with the world? Some people continuously claim what's wrong with the world, others complain more of what's wrong with their life. Mm. Oh. And that's a very seductive thing because the ego likes that. It inflates the ego. If you complain about other people, you experience an ego inflation. Why? Because the ego feels itself to be superior when it can complain about others. It's implied. You're a judge of the other, and you pronounce the other as delinquent, insufficient, not good enough, or bad, wanting in the old sense of the word. Very seductive to experience ego inflation. And all that, as you awaken spiritually, become more free of this reactivity. Then what the words you speak, the actions you take in your immediate surroundings make the world a better place. And you break the karmic chain, which is action, reaction, action, reaction. Some people who come into this world into a very dysfunctional family environment, and there are millions of people who are born into a very dysfunctional family environment, and it's a huge, huge challenge. Because if you're not given enough love or attention, you're not encouraged as a child. If that is missing in your early years, it is a huge burden or dysfunction that you carry in many cases for the rest of your life. And in many cases, you inflict the same thing on your children that your parents have inflicted on you. There has not been enough consciousness to break the pattern. So these things are those patterns that we inherit. It's only through waking up, so becoming aware that these patterns can be transcended. That is our task here. And that's how you make the world a better place. You have to, the dysfunctional patterns in your own life, you have to look at them. And I know many people who've had very dysfunctional upbringing and then have suffered enormously because they were forced to, because of their unconsciousness, not enough awareness, they were forced to reenact the same patterns that they experienced. And then they so in that you bring more suffering into this world. Are you bringing more suffering into this world, or are you bringing healing into this world? Healing is not weakness, healing is power. So you have to seriously ask yourself, next question in your world, what do you do with the internet when you social media? What is the quality and the nature of your interactions with other humans that you in most cases have never met? So you don't know them as humans. They are just abstract symbols on the screen. They have expressed an opinion. And they've expressed an opinion that seems to conflict with your opinion. And suddenly this unconscious reactivity, this human whom you don't know, have never met, you only know him or her through certain statements on Twitter, and suddenly you treat this other human being as some kind of demon. It's happened millions of times. Is that creating a better world? And the Twitter world is showing increasing signs of insanity. So it's an externalization of the human mind. You see it, oh, there it is. It's good it's wonderful. You can see it. Before it was all in here. Now you can actually see it on your screen. There's the craziness of the human mind. Well, that's helpful. It's good to be able to see it. It's an externalization of the collective mind. Before we invented this technology, all humans could do is they can shout at somebody in the street, but you can only reach one or two or three people. Or you could, well, maybe you could stand on a soapbox in Hyde Park Corner in London and give a speech, but even then you only had a few people listening to you. But now, even the most unconscious person will have an audience. He or she will interact similarly unconscious people on Twitter and other uh, platforms. And so, as you know, one wrong tweet can destroy your entire career. So this is the certain the every age, in every age time period, uh, human unconsciousness manifests in somewhat different ways, and it's easier when you look back on a past age. We can see, oh, weren't they crazy to do something like that? How could humans do something like that? It's more difficult to become aware of the craziness in your own time period because you're in the middle of it. Retrospectively, it's easier to see the craziness. So you make sure to create a better world that do not participate in the craziness of this world. To be very, don't be at the mercy of others as far as your state of consciousness is concerned. And you can only do that by being present more and more, always connecting with that alertness, a very key word. Be alert so that you know what's going on in your mind and in your emotion. Don't repress anything, just know. And that will gradually dissolve dysfunctional patterns. And you still feel drawn back in, that's fine. So this is the beginning of changing the world on your personal sphere. And then if you can then interact through the media, various internet platforms, you can put out something that is more beneficial. Then you already begin to affect a larger sphere. You have everybody has a sphere of influence through these platforms here. And what is it? What do you put out through your sphere of influence? So there's a great opportunity for something that in many cases is quite insane, but it is also a great opportunity for actually help to elevate human consciousness. So that is your great opportunity, no matter how you do it. And then we come to the larger sphere, political, social institutions, and so on. How do you change that? How do you diminish the suffering of so many humans on the planet? Well, you continue to you no longer contribute to the suffering of others. So to some extent, you have to allow humans to evolve. Humanity is evolving. The consciousness of humanity is evolving. And it's vitally important to bring healing and compassion and so on to all your interactions, whether at home or online or wherever you go. And if you want to participate in political discourse, maybe you want to stand to run for office somewhere, who knows? You need to be really conscious if you decide to do that. And you may feel called upon to do that. And then it becomes equally, you've already, in your own personal life, you're already practicing not being reactive, not being at the mercy of other people's state of consciousness. And then you can bring that into that wider, greater sphere of uh, political structures and so on, if that's what you choose to do. But you also need to realize that humanity is, as I said before, is a work in progress. So humans are slowly evolving towards more consciousness. The entire universe is in the is engaged in an awakening process, and you are part of the awakening process of the universe. You can see it on the the planet, how gradually from very simple life forms gradually grew, became more complex. Then they were destroyed. There were many, so five extinctions already. Uh, then they were destroyed. Then new life forms arose from, where did they arise from? From an underlying field of vast intelligence that, that then manifests through physical forms, gradually manifests more fully, gradually manifests uh, in more complex life forms that have more greater share of consciousness, but it's always the one consciousness moving through. So have compassion with humans. A lot of the suffering that humans experience is created by other humans. Just read history, a history book, and you see how dreadful suffering humans have inflicted on other humans throughout history, 20th century alone. We've now become very much the last few, at present time, very much conscious of racial suffering that humans have suffered from, tremendous suffering that humans inflicted on other humans. And it's great that we've become aware of it now instead of before just the, it was just nobody could talk about it. It was told no. Throughout history, slavery was an accepted fact that nobody seemed to question it. Consciousness had not yet developed enough, but now consciousness is developing and we become aware of it, and it's a wonderful thing. Uh, as long as the what arises doesn't isn't it's there. There's sometimes the danger that even realizations can be hijacked by the ego, so to speak. And when you know that something has been hijacked by the ego, is when you demonize others, for example, because the ego loves to demonize others. So be very careful with it's very so that you get dragged into the gravitational pull of the ego, uh, drags you back into unconsciousness. Uh, we're living at a time that's very challenging, but also a time of opportunity. Nobody can predict right now whether we're going to experience a regression in state of consciousness. Every regression in the evolution of consciousness is actually part of the evolution of consciousness. Or if we can go from here straight to a more conscious society, more conscious world. But humans have to go through this evolutionary process, and not every human is at the same stage of evolutionary development. You have to be compassionate with people who are not yet evolving. That could be your parents. If you become compassionate with when you go to you visit your parents and they have trapped in the same patterns that they were already 20 years ago, and they criticize you in the same way they always do, and you realize they are trapped in their patterns, and you have compassion and you allow humans to go through their patterns. And if in some cases you even have to allow humans who insist to go through their own self-created suffering, you do as much as you can to help to bring more awareness into this world, to bring love ultimately, not conventional love, but the deeper the love that recognizes every other human as inseparable from who you are. So to recognize the other as ultimately not separate from you, as that is true love. Love, what that is, that nothing else will redeem the world and create a better world. We need humans to be able to access the dimension from which love can flow. And love means what the Dalai Lama calls kindness. It's the same thing. What he really is talking about is love. So Dalai Lama said, he didn't say, strangely, my religion is Buddhism. the Dalai Lama said, my religion is kindness. So he's really pointing to the essence of what the trans, and that kindness is uh, uh, manifests as compassion and love, empathy, and also manifests as wisdom. So wisdom is very important when it's not just intelligence, it's wisdom is something deeper that sees the totality of things, that doesn't attack one problem and then create three more problems. The solution to one problem creates three even bigger problems that applying only the uh, intellectual analysis or conventional intelligence. Wisdom sees the totality and then takes action on the basis of that. Let's see another question. Is there some type of discipline that is needed to be successful with conscious manifestation? If so, can you describe what the discipline is that is needed? Well, basically, I have already described the discipline that's needed in your daily life to be aware of yourself and of your own state of consciousness. Uh, Also, an important factor, perhaps, that is implied in what we've been saying, but it's worth pointing it out explicitly, is the importance of what is conventionally called gratitude, but there could be other words. Gratitude is a very powerful transformational tool and also one of the most powerful tools for manifesting better things in your life. Now, what does that mean? The gratitude is to acknowledge the good in your life now. And it's surprising how many people don't do that, who can only see the bad in their lives or only complain. But it's extremely powerful to acknowledge the good that's in your life now. Now, let's talk about this for a moment. This does not mean that you have a conceptual idea of what your life is, and then you compare it to somebody else's life, and you say, oh, really, I should be happy because I have it so much better than look at these people. They've got their life is worse than mine, so I really should be grateful for my life. That's not it. That's not real gratitude. That you're moving within the conceptual realm, and your feeling of well-being is dependent on somebody else who has less than you or is suffering more than you. So gratitude is not if you compare yourself, because that's a misconception, a very common misconception of gratitude, is you compare yourself to somebody else or even a whole group of people. So you look at people in the third world, I really should be grateful. We are so much better off, even though I may be poor, but I'm still better off than people. So let's be grateful. No, that's not real gratitude. You're depending on others to be worse off than you, so that you can feel gratitude. It's crazy. It feeds the ego. No, gratitude is to acknowledge the good that's in your life now, this moment. Okay, so it's not the good in your life situation. I'm fine because I have achieved this or that or whatever. No, at this moment. And that's simple things. It really comes down to simple things. What can I be grateful for at this moment? Wow, there's so much I can be grateful for. Now, what is it? To be grateful is to acknowledge something, to give it attention, and to appreciate it. I have this, you can't see it, but I have a nice round table here. Well, see, and it's lovely. I touch it. It's made of wood, and it's lovely. It's not spectacular. It doesn't need to be spectacular, but it has a presence and a beingness. There's light coming through the window there and from behind me. I often sit here. I, I'm lucky to have these trees here, and I often sit here. There's a little screen to, otherwise there's too much glare. But I often sit here. I look at the trees for 10, 15 minutes, and there's a continuous feeling of goodness because, and that's called, we could call that gratitude, but it's, I don't say in my mind, I'm so grateful for these trees. I simply appreciate the wonder and aliveness, the beingness of these trees. So I acknowledge the good in this moment by appreciating the wonder, the miracle, and of these trees. It's just you can look at the sky. Here today happens to be completely overcast, but and that's fine too because there's light filtering continue through. There's more light in a way today than is on when the sky is blue because the light is dispersed by the cloud. It's everywhere. And it comes from the sun. It filters through the clouds. Now you appreciate that. You look at a potted plant. You're grateful for that. You're grateful for all the little things. You hear a bird. Oh, you drink a glass of water, acknowledging your breathing. So that's gratitude. The gratitude is the appreciation of life that's around you. So you can say the gratitude for being alive, to feel that you're alive in your entire body, the inner body, the invisible presence that inhabits the body, to feel that. So all the little things, gratitude is best applied to all the small things that continuously surround you in life. And then you see the goodness of it all. Or you can just, let's say you have little or no money, and you're looking for abundance. So how do you bring abundance into your life? You have to acknowledge the abundance that is already everywhere around you. You walk past this, you're walking in the street, and there's a flower store. There's flowers on display and potted plants outside if you live in a city. An abundance of life, the flowers, just amazing. There's abundance, and you can look everywhere and see abundant life. Jesus used that term. He said, I want you to have abundant life. In other translations, he says the same term translated in a different way. I want you to have the fullness of life. Jesus promises the fullness of life or abundant life. Now, true abundance, which many people are looking for, and they think abundance is to do with having many things. It could be that quite a few things come to you when you access the source of all abundance, which of course is within you. It's the feeling of the fullness of life. Now, once you get this feeling in the present moment, then this is perhaps the very core of gratitude, is to feel the aliveness of life within yourself. So when Jesus talks about the fullness of life or abundant life, he's not talking about It is not a prophecy of the arising of shopping malls 2000 years later. He wasn't talking about the abundance that you find when you walk through a shopping mall and say, oh, look at, oh, I must have that. Oh, I must, all these things, I must have that, I must have that. That comes from a place of lack, the egoic place of lack. I must fill up the sense of lack with this and that and that. That's a kind of addictive thing, or if you might have noticed when you go to the shopping mall and you feel very tired after, well, I do. I walk around for 10 minutes and that's enough. So Jesus wasn't talking about lots of things. He's talking about the core of life, the fullness that is inseparable from what when we started today. We started with getting in touch with the consciousness within you to realize that you are conscious, that the essence of who you are is the awareness, not your history. The essence of who you are is the awareness, and the awareness of that awareness is the realization of that which is prior to all forms, that can become forms, but that which is prior to all manifestations is the unmanifested life, the one consciousness, the one life that underlies the entire universe. And because you are only a microscopic version of the entire universe, you can discover virtually all the secrets of the universe by going within, because you are inseparable from the universe. You discover the most incredible, deepest realizations, not factual things. You may not know how many planets have life, intelligent life in our galaxy. Nobody knows, not those things, but the deeper laws and movements that underlie the manifestation of the universe. You can find that within yourself by going within. So the abundance is the aliveness that is within you, and it's the awareness of that aliveness. But the awareness of that aliveness and the aliveness are a single thing. The duality arises when we talk about it. Then you can say, oh, I'm aware of consciousness. But you can't be aware of consciousness because the awareness is the consciousness. The consciousness is the awareness. So consciousness is becoming self-aware. And what is that consciousness? It's not yours. It's the consciousness of the universe manifesting through this little form. So you are part of the awakening process of the universe. So all manifestation that you do in your life must be aligned with the awakening universe. And the universe is moving towards greater consciousness. But where does it come from? It comes from an unmanifested source of all life that is traditionally has been called God. The source of all life emanates into this universe, but it has no location in space or time. It is beyond that. But to realize that the essence of who you are is inseparable from that. That is when the ripple on the surface of the ocean suddenly realizes that it is the ocean. Yes, it's also a ripple, not for long. For a little while, it's also the ripple, but in essence, the ripple is the ocean. And when the ripple becomes aware of its true nature, then that means the ocean has become aware of its true nature. The totality of life has become aware, has woken up. That is so everything that we do in what we want to manifest, let's make sure that it is part of the evolving consciousness. So even the simplest things, let's say you want to manifest you're a hairdresser, and now you want to manifest, now that you can, salons are open again. Okay, I'm going to have a hairdressing salon. Okay, I'm going to focus on that. and I can feel that I already have it because I can feel the fullness of life already. And I just bring in the image of this hairdressing salon and it bring it into this sense of fullness, which means you're already feeling that it's there. And whether it comes on to be secondary now. That's you become a very powerful manifester if you do not depend on some future outcome. You're already experiencing the fullness of life. But you also know that this hairdressing salon is a place where people will, when they go there, they not only get a good haircut or hairdo, they also get your presence. They also get your attention. They also get the energy that you emanate there, and they will feel better while you're cutting their hair. I'm just giving one example. I could give thousands of examples. They feel in that moment. They feel you listen to them. You acknowledge that they're not just a client. You acknowledge their beingness. I always say the human being has the two dimensions. The human is the conditioned with a history. The being is the unconditioned. So that's the consciousness that you are. That is the transcendent dimension. If you don't know that, your life is the most frustrating experience. You might have noticed that without that realization of the deeper dimension of who you are, all you experience is one damn thing after another. It's always, oh my God, not another thing. So the hairdresser, now everybody who comes into that, yes, they're getting a good haircut. Let's presume you're a good hairdresser. That's important too on the human level. But there's something else that you provide, and that is the love, one can say, to acknowledge everyone, the beingness of every human. And perhaps some hairdressers, after a few years, become very good counselors because they've listened to so many stories, and suddenly they can actually give good advice. It doesn't matter what the form is that your manifestation take, but make sure that it is aligned in some way with the evolving consciousness. So you bring something good into this world. You make a contribution, you bring more goodness into this world in one way or another. Even if you, whatever it is, you make, if you're very good at something, you're good at sports or something, and then people like to watch you. Why do people, sometimes ask, why do people watch a tennis match? It's always the same thing. They just knock, there's a ball and then it goes on for hours. But it can be very, very, why are they so excited by this? Well, on the one hand, yes, they have a favorite. They either favor one or the other, and that is an egoic thing. But I believe they also find it fascinating because the people who are, if they are masters in tennis playing, they are in a state of absolute presence while they play. And somehow it's lovely to watch people who are in the field of the zone of mastery, and because something almost transmits itself. It doesn't mean that these tennis players are necessarily more conscious than others in the rest of their lives. We don't know. But while they're engaged in the activities that they have mastered absolutely, you can somehow absorb a little bit of that presence. It's great to watch. So I occasionally watch, not very often, tennis, and I can sense why people, there's the two reasons why people watch it. One, they want their favorite to win, but there's a deeper reason, that is, there's something almost transmits itself. This presence can be contagious almost. And again, here we come to an important point. When you are present, that also affects many, many others that you come into contact with. It's contagious in a positive sense. There's a transmission of presence, and there can even be a transmission of presence in some miraculous way through the screen right now. How is that possible? These are just, well, it's possible because the screen is in your consciousness. who knows whether there's actually a screen out there, but the screen is something that arises in your consciousness. So even there, it can work. So whatever it is you want to manifest in this life, go ahead, but realize the foundation for manifestation is, I call it the vertical dimension. That's the cross. Life has the two dimensions. The vertical, which is the present moment, which is the depths of who you are in the essence of your being. That is, and who you are in the essence of your being is already complete. You don't need to become a better person in the essence of your being. You just need to manifest into this horizontal world more of the essence of your being. So on the deepest level, you cannot improve upon anything or who you are. But on the horizontal, they have the cross, the two dimensions. On the horizontal, there's a lot you can do. But it is not ultimately beneficial in the absence of the vertical. But if the vertical is there, then that more and more from there, which is consciousness, can flow into the horizontal dimension. And that's how you create a better world. That is the miracle, and that is the secret, and that is your task. In this, what else that's the purpose of your life, and in that doesn't matter what form it takes. It could be the simplest things. May you acknowledge the good that's already there, and if you feel there's much more that you could do on the horse, yes, there probably is. But in the meantime, let's say you deliver. We had a meal delivered yesterday to DoorDash. So DoorDash, there was a brief interaction. I opened the door, and before they just left it at the door. It's the virus thing. But I opened the door, and for 5 seconds, I interacted with the Dasher, they call them, the people who work for DoorDash. They bring food from restaurants, in case you don't know. We interacted. There was a moment of interaction, and I could sense a connectedness. He loved interacting with me for these few seconds, and I loved it. He wasn't a DoorDasher. There was the being behind it, and I acknowledged his being. And through that, he felt very good just looking at me. It's nothing to do with me as a person at all. And it was a lovely encounter for a few seconds. So, and if you're a DoorDasher for a while, why not practice that now? Many people that you deliver food to will probably not acknowledge your being, but it doesn't mean you cannot acknowledge their being. So as long as you do that, it can be even there, you can bring more consciousness into this world, no matter where you are and what you're at, instead of complaining that you really should be doing something more interesting. Yes, perhaps you will be doing something more interesting, but a starting point is acknowledge the good that's here now, then you're much more likely to evolve. The situation is much more likely to evolve from there. But if you are in a continuous state of resistance to what is now, you're much more likely to be stuck for a long time, if not forever. As you know, the famous saying goes, what you resist persists, which is, of course, very true. So alignment with universal purpose. Universal purpose is consciousness. Bring more of that. And this consciousness manifests as an emanation of kindness, love, compassion, a sense of deep connectedness. And it also manifests as wisdom when you use your mind, so that it's not just the conditioned mind that's operating. There's actually an awareness behind it, and the conditioned mind is then inspired by the deeper consciousness that's behind it. of which it is an inseparable part. It's inspired then by the deeper and then the mind is a lovely tool too. You can create through the mind, but you can only create if you have access to real creativity. You need access to that deeper dimension that is transcendent to the mind, not separate from it. The analogy I used again is the thinking mind could be like the ripple on the surface, and then there's the ocean, of which the ripple is only a temporary expression. It's so that life is, once you realize that, then any situation is fine for the time being, any situation that you're in, and the more you are aligned with the present moment, the more likely uh, it is that the situation will evolve and change to reflect your growing consciousness. That's a miracle of being alive, and that's why you're here. So the picture is not stuck. I just stopped talking. Just wanted to make sure you know. I have probably said enough. The rest is up to you. Many of these things I said you already knew. And if you didn't know them in your conscious mind, there was a kind of recognition. It suddenly made, that makes sense. Somehow you knew that already. So the truth is always recognized. It's not something new that you learn. Perhaps you hadn't realized it. The truth is realized, recognized. And then there may be others who are not yet ready for it. That's fine. There may be some people who said, oh, somebody said to a friend perhaps, oh, you must listen to this guy Eckhart. He might have something important to say. And then the friend looks, what the hell is he talking about? So it's fine. Not everybody is yet ready for the next step in evolution. Usually it means they need to suffer a little bit more, mostly self-created, unconsciously. That's also part of the evolutionary process of the universe. So the rest is up to you. It is a wonderful adventure. You don't need to seek for satisfaction on the personal level. It comes as a byproduct quite often. Satisfaction on the personal level comes on the horizontal level, comes as the icing on the cake or the byproduct of something something deeper than that. Something that happens through you, that you can't claim I did that. It happens through you. And then the personal sense of self, they might feel, oh, it's nice to have, but if it claims possessions as I did that, you fall back into illusion as a separate self. You cannot do anything as a separate self. As Jesus said, I of my own self can do nothing. It is the Father that does it through me. What's the Father? The consciousness that emanates from the source of all life, that is called God. Thank you. I will see you again, perhaps soon, but always in the present moment.